Welcome back to Sleeping History Dreams. Tonight, we step into a real moment from the past, through the lives of the people who lived it, the places they walked, and the records they left behind. Settle in and let the story begin. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the cries of the wounded. On June 17, 1775, the Battle of Bunker Hill unfolded in a brutal clash of wills and ideals, just outside Boston. As the sun dipped low in the sky, the colonial forces, numbering around 1,500 under the command of Colonel William Prescott, stood resolute atop the earthen fortifications they had hastily constructed. The ground trembled beneath the marching feet of British troops, approximately 2,200 strong, led by General William Howe. "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Prescott's voice rang out, a rallying cry that ignited a fierce determination among his men. The British advanced, their red coats a stark contrast against the green of the grass and the dirt of the makeshift fort. As the distance closed, the colonists, fueled by a mix of fear and hope, held their breath in anticipation. The British soldiers surged forward. A deafening roar erupted as the colonists unleashed their fire. The British line staggered, caught off guard by the precision and ferocity of the American resistance. The first wave fell, and with it, the confidence of the British commanders began to wane. Yet the British regrouped, their resolve hardening. They charged again, and the colonists held their ground, firing from behind the earthworks. With each volley, the air filled with the stench of gunpowder and the cries of the dying. Prescott's men fought valiantly, but their ammunition dwindled rapidly. "We must retreat," came a voice from the back. The order echoed through the ranks, but it was met with resistance. "We'll hold as long as we can," shouted another soldier, driven by a sense of purpose. As the sun began to set, the tide of battle shifted. The British, having suffered heavy casualties, launched a final desperate assault. With bayonets fixed, they surged up the hill. The colonists, now outnumbered and out of ammunition, began to give ground. Prescott himself was forced to retreat, his heart heavy with the loss of life. The ground littered with the fallen, both British and American, bore witness to the brutal reality of conflict. But to understand how we got here, the simmering tensions, the fervent cries for freedom, and the events leading up to this fierce confrontation, one must delve deeper into the complex web of grievances that ignited the flames of revolution. By the spring of 1775, the air in the American colonies was thick with discontent, and the sense of impending conflict was palpable. The colonists, once subjects of the British Crown, were now increasingly aware of their growing desire for autonomy. The imposition of taxes without representation sparked outrage, particularly following the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Acts of 1767. These measures prompted widespread protests and boycotts, igniting a revolutionary spirit among the populace. The Boston Tea Party in December 1773, where colonists, disguised as Mohawk Indians, dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, marked a pivotal act of defiance against British authority. As tensions escalated, a group of passionate leaders emerged, each driven by a deep-seated desire for liberty. Samuel Adams, known as the father of the Revolution, was a masterful orator whose fiery speeches ignited the passions of his fellow colonists. He once declared, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen to set brushfires of freedom in the minds of men." Adams understood the power of public sentiment and mobilized the citizens of Boston against British oppression. In the same vein, Patrick Henry, a gifted lawyer and politician, became known for his impassioned calls to arms. His famous words, "Give me liberty or give me death," echoed throughout the colonies, inspiring countless individuals to join the cause. Yet his fervor for independence was matched by a deep understanding of the risks involved. Henry recognized that the fight for freedom was fraught with peril, yet he remained undeterred, believing the cause was worth any sacrifice. As the situation intensified, General Thomas Gage, the British commander in Boston, found himself in a precarious position. With approximately 2,000 troops stationed in the city, Gage was tasked with maintaining order amidst growing unrest. His orders were clear: suppress the rebellion. However, as he observed the fervor of the colonists, he became acutely aware that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. The British government's response to colonial dissent only deepened the divide. The intolerable acts, initiated in response to the Boston Tea Party, further restricted colonial autonomy and fueled resentment. In the neighboring towns of Lexington and Concord, whispers of rebellion began to take shape. The Massachusetts Provincial Congress, a gathering of colonial leaders, appointed Colonel William Prescott and other militia leaders to prepare for potential conflict. Prescott, a man of unwavering resolve and strategic prowess, knew that the time for action was fast approaching. He famously commanded his troops, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," a testament to his understanding of the dire circumstances they faced. On the night of April 18, 1775, Paul Revere and William Dawes rode through the countryside, warning the militia of the approaching British troops. "The regulars are coming," they shouted, alerting the farmers and townsfolk who would soon become the backbone of the colonial resistance. The midnight ride was not just a call to arms, but a symbol of the unity that had begun to form among the disparate colonies. Friends and neighbors, once divided by regional differences, were now united by a common cause. As the dawn broke on April 19th, the first shots of the American Revolution rang out at Lexington. Historians refer to it as the shot heard round the world, a moment that would alter the course of history. The colonial militia, numbering around 70 men, confronted the British troops who had come to confiscate colonial arms and arrest rebel leaders. The conflict that ensued lasted only minutes, but it claimed the lives of 8 colonists and marked the beginning of open warfare. Following Lexington, the British forces marched on to Concord, where they faced greater resistance. The colonial militia, emboldened by their initial encounter, began to gather in larger numbers. As they engaged the British, the colonists utilized their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, employing guerrilla tactics that frustrated the more traditional British forces. The fighting at Concord resulted in the deaths of 273 British soldiers and around 95 colonists wounded or killed. These early skirmishes were not merely battles, they symbolized the culmination of years of escalating tensions and grievances. They represented the colonists' refusal to be subjugated and their determination to fight for their rights. The resolve of men like Prescott, Adams, and Henry galvanized the revolutionaries, while the miscalculations of British commanders like Gage showcased the disconnect between the crown and the realities on the ground. As the sun set on that fateful day, the battles of Lexington and Concord had transformed the colonial rebellion into a full-fledged revolution. The colonists were no longer merely subjects of British rule. They had become soldiers fighting for their freedom. The events of April 19, 1775, ignited a fire that could not be extinguished, leading to the formation of the Continental Army and the eventual declaration of independence. In the ensuing months, the struggle for autonomy would escalate, and the realities of war would take a heavy toll on both sides. The path ahead would be fraught with hardship and sacrifice, but the desire for independence had been firmly etched into the hearts of the American people. What began as a series of protests had evolved into a battle for liberty, forever changing the course of history. The echoes of those early confrontations would resonate through the ages, reminding future generations of the sacrifices made in the name of freedom. In the spring of 1775, the American colonies stood on the precipice of a revolution. Tensions simmered, fueled by years of oppressive British policies. The echoes of discontent had been building since the imposition of the Stamp Act in 1765, followed by the Townshend Acts of 1767, which incited even greater resentment. By the time of the Boston Tea Party in December 1773, where colonists defiantly dumped tea into the harbor to protest taxation without representation, the seeds of rebellion had been sown deep within the hearts of many. Colonial leaders were acutely aware of the precariousness of their position. Samuel Adams, one of the most fervent advocates for independence, declared, "The destruction of the tea is a bold stroke and a step towards liberty." The fiery spirit of revolution was palpable in the streets of Boston, where whispers of freedom mingled with the smell of gunpowder. By April 1775, the British government, led by Prime Minister Lord North, was increasingly alarmed by the growing unrest. General Thomas Gage, commander of British forces in North America, was tasked with quelling the insurrection. On the night of April 18th, Gage dispatched British troops to seize colonial military supplies stored at Concord, Massachusetts. The decision was fraught with risk, for it would not only provoke the colonists, but could also ignite the flames of war. As darkness fell, two patriots, Paul Revere and William Dawes, rode through the night, warning local militias of the impending British advance. Revere famously cried, "The British are coming!" As he galloped through the countryside, his heart racing with a mix of fear and exhilaration. By dawn, the quiet farms and villages were buzzing with urgency and anticipation as militiamen gathered to defend their rights and homes. At dawn on April 19th, the British troops reached Lexington, where they encountered approximately 70 armed militiamen. A tense standoff ensued, and amidst the confusion, a shot rang out, known as the shot heard round the world. Reports vary on who fired first, but the chaos that followed left 8 colonists dead and several wounded. This confrontation marked the beginning of an open conflict between Britain and the colonies. As the British continued toward Concord, they encountered fierce resistance. The colonial fighters, emboldened by their commitment to liberty, engaged the British soldiers in skirmishes along the route. As they retreated, the British faced a relentless rain of musket fire from behind trees and fences, a tactic that demonstrated the determination and resolve of the colonial militia. A witness recalled the road was lined with men, every tree was a soldier, and the British were in full retreat. By the end of the day, the British suffered significant casualties, with over 200 soldiers dead or wounded. The colonists had proven their mettle and resolve, igniting the flames of revolution. The Boston Massacre, the Tea Party, and now the battles of Lexington and Concord had woven a tapestry of defiance against British rule. In the wake of these events, the Second Continental Congress convened in May 1775. Delegates from the colonies gathered in Philadelphia to discuss their next steps. The atmosphere was charged with urgency and determination. George Washington was appointed as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, a role he would embrace with both honor and trepidation. The Congress faced the monumental task of uniting the colonies in their struggle for independence. John Adams, an ardent supporter of independence, urged his fellow delegates to declare their freedom from British tyranny. "We cannot be happy without being free," he proclaimed, articulating the sentiments that had taken root across the colonies. As the summer of 1775 progressed, the war began to take on a life of its own. The siege of Boston, initiated by the colonists, put the British troops in a precarious situation. The American forces surrounded the city, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. The British were trapped, their hold on the region weakening. In June 1775, the Battle of Bunker Hill further illustrated the resolve of the colonial forces. Although it ended in a costly British victory, the heavy losses inflicted upon the British troops, over 1,000 casualties, sent shockwaves through the British military command. Colonel William Prescott's famous command, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," became a rallying cry for the colonial fighters. By the time the British withdrew from Boston in March 1776, the conflict had escalated beyond mere skirmishes. The desire for independence was now a fervent reality for many. The Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson and adopted on July 4, 1776, encapsulated the aspirations of a nation yearning for freedom. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," it proclaimed, a bold declaration that would resonate through the ages. As the summer of 1776 unfolded, battles raged across the colonies. The Revolutionary War was no longer a distant possibility. It was a brutal and relentless reality for soldiers and civilians alike. The stakes were high and the outcome uncertain. Patriots and loyalists clashed, family ties were severed, and communities were torn apart by the conflict. The war would not only test the resolve of the colonists, but would also shape the very identity of a new nation. With each passing day, the ideals of liberty and self-governance took root more firmly within the hearts of the people. The journey toward independence was fraught with peril, yet the spirit of the revolution burned brightly. As one soldier wrote in his diary, "We fight for our families, our homes, and our freedom." The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and the sound of musket fire as a new chapter in history unfolded. The path was uncertain, yet the promise of a free and independent America beckoned, transforming the aspirations of a few into the collective dream of a nation. The year 1776 dawned under a heavy cloud of uncertainty for the American colonies. The Revolutionary War had ignited a fervor that swept through the 13 colonies, but it also brought harrowing consequences. The human cost was becoming painfully clear. By the spring of that year, the conflict had already claimed thousands of lives. The Battle of Bunker Hill had left approximately 450 colonial soldiers dead or wounded, while British losses numbered over 1,000, a staggering toll that showcased the ferocity of the clashes to come. In the wake of these battles, there was a palpable sense of urgency among colonial leaders. The Continental Congress had convened once again, and the atmosphere was charged with determination. On April 15, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution calling for independence from Britain. His words echoed through the halls that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. The delegates understood that this declaration would irrevocably change their lives, transforming them from subjects of the British Crown into rebels. The urgency of the moment weighed heavily on figures like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. As they deliberated, they faced the stark reality of their situation. Jefferson, tasked with penning the Declaration of Independence, infused the document with eloquence and conviction. He wrote of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a phrase that would resonate through history. But the gravity of their decision was not lost on him. He understood the peril that awaited them. On July 2, 1776, Congress voted in favor of Lee's resolution, but it wasn't until July 4 that the final wording of the declaration was adopted, formalizing their break from Britain. The battles that followed were grim demonstrations of the stakes involved. The Battle of Long Island, fought from August 26 to August 30, 1776, was a crushing defeat for the Continental Army. General George Washington, commanding approximately 20,000 troops, faced a British force of nearly 32,000 under General William Howe. The Americans were outmaneuvered, and the loss was staggering. Over 1,000 colonial soldiers were taken prisoner, and the remnants of Washington's army were forced to retreat, barely escaping annihilation. The sound of cannon fire echoed through the New York countryside, marking a dark chapter in the struggle for independence. As the war dragged on, winter approached, and the cold set in. The conditions faced by the troops were dire. In December 1776, Washington's army found themselves in a precarious situation at Trenton, New Jersey. Their numbers had dwindled to around 5,000, and morale was at an all-time low. Many soldiers were unfit for duty, suffering from frostbite and starvation. Washington, understanding the critical need for a victory, devised a bold plan. On Christmas night, he led his men across the icy Delaware River, a move that would become legendary. The surprise attack on December 26th caught the Hessian garrison off guard. The Americans took over 900 prisoners, a much-needed victory that revitalized the revolutionary spirit. The triumph at Trenton was not merely a military success, it was a turning point that reignited hope among weary soldiers and supporters alike. As Washington later wrote, "Victory is a great deodorant," and indeed, it provided the fresh scent of renewed purpose amidst the stench of despair. Yet the conflict was far from over. The next significant encounter came at the Battle of Princeton on January 3, 1777. Once again, Washington's forces, bolstered by the victory at Trenton, faced British troops. In a remarkable display of tactical genius, Washington flanked the enemy, leading to another decisive victory. This battle was critical. It demonstrated that the Continental Army could stand up to the formidable British forces. The cost, however, remained high. Both sides suffered casualties, with approximately 200 American soldiers lost, underscoring the brutal reality of the war. As the spring of 1777 unfolded, the conflict intensified further. On May 24th, General Howe launched a campaign to seize Philadelphia, the heart of the Revolution. The The Battle of Brandywine on September 11th pitted his forces against Washington's army. The British inflicted heavy casualties on the colonists, who lost around 1,000 men. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the cries of the wounded on that blood-soaked battlefield served as a grim reminder of the conflict's toll. The winter of 1777 was particularly harsh for the Continental Army as they endured the bitter cold at Valley Forge. Over 2,500 soldiers perished from disease, starvation, and exposure, a staggering loss that tested the mettle of all who remained. Washington's leadership was crucial during this time as he worked tirelessly to secure supplies and bolster morale. The arrival of Baron von Steuben, a Prussian military officer, brought much-needed training and discipline to the struggling troops. His influence transformed the ragtag group into a more effective fighting force, instilling a sense of hope amidst despair. The Revolutionary War had become a crucible of human sacrifice. As the year drew to a close, the stakes were clearer than ever. Independence was not merely a lofty goal, it demanded blood, sweat, and tears from all involved. The Declaration had been signed, but the realization of its ideals would come at an unimaginable cost. In those dark moments of crisis, the words of Samuel Adams resonated. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen on setting brushfires of freedom in the minds of men. As the winter winds howled through the encampment at Valley Forge, the ember of rebellion continued to flicker, fueled by the resolve of those who dared to envision a new world, one built on the principles of liberty and justice. The summer of 1776 brought a sense of urgency and uncertainty to the 13 American colonies. The seeds of rebellion had taken root, and the call for independence echoed through the streets and parlors from Boston to Charleston. Among the prominent figures at this transformative moment were George Washington, now commanding the Continental Army, and Thomas Jefferson, who was entrusted with the monumental task of drafting the Declaration of Independence. As the conflict escalated, the stakes grew higher, and the battles that followed would determine the fate of a fledgling nation. On August 26, 1776, the British launched a significant campaign on Long Island, aiming to seize control of New York City. General William Howe, leading approximately 32,000 British troops, sought to crush the American forces before they could fully coalesce. Washington's army, numbering around 20,000, had been hastily assembled and morale was shaky. The Americans were inexperienced and ill-equipped, yet they were fortified by a fervent desire for independence. The day of the battle dawned with a heavy fog, obscuring the movements of both sides. As the fighting began, the Americans were caught off guard by a flanking maneuver executed by British General Cornwallis. Colonel William Prescott's men, still reeling from the recent loss at Bunker Hill, fought valiantly but were soon overwhelmed. The chaos of battle was palpable, musket fire rang out, the clash of bayonets echoed, and the cries of wounded men filled the air. The British forces advanced relentlessly, forcing the Americans into a retreat. Despite their determination, the Continental Army suffered a staggering defeat, with nearly 1,000 American soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. In the aftermath of the Battle of Long Island, Washington faced a daunting choice. His army was demoralized, and the threat of complete annihilation loomed large. Yet, in a move that would define his leadership, he ordered a strategic withdrawal, ferrying his remaining troops across the East River to safety under the cover of darkness. This daring escape demonstrated Washington's resolve and tactical acumen, preserving the Continental Army to fight another day. Meanwhile, across the continent, Thomas Jefferson was finalizing the Declaration of Independence. In a quiet chamber in Philadelphia, he penned the eloquent words that would resonate through history. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." The document, adopted on July 4, 1776, was a bold proclamation of the colony's intention to sever ties with Britain. The Continental Congress unanimously endorsed this declaration, knowing full well the implications it carried. As the news spread, celebrations erupted in the streets, but so too did the shadow of impending conflict. By December of that year, Washington's army faced one of its most dire moments. The harsh winter had set in, and the troops were ill-equipped for the frigid conditions. Many soldiers lacked proper clothing, and supplies were dwindling. Washington knew that the morale of his army was fragile. Defeat could lead to disintegration. To reignite the revolutionary spirit, he devised a bold plan to strike at the heart of British forces stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. On the night of December 25, 1776, Washington led his troops across the icy Delaware River, a perilous journey marked by biting winds and freezing temperatures. The crossing, fraught with danger, took several hours. As dawn broke on December 26th, the Americans launched a surprise attack against the Hessian forces, who were unprepared and reveling in holiday festivities. The ensuing Battle of Trenton was swift and decisive. Washington's forces captured nearly 1,000 Hessians, suffering minimal casualties themselves. The victory at Trenton reinvigorated the Continental Army and the sentiment for independence. Washington's bold leadership was celebrated, and the triumph sparked a newfound hope among the colonists. As the news spread, it ignited a fire of enthusiasm, drawing many to enlist and fight for the cause. The tide was beginning to turn, and the spirit of revolution surged through the colonies. Yet the path to victory was still fraught with challenges. In the spring of 1777, the British regrouped, launching a new campaign to divide the colonies by taking control of the Hudson River. The stakes were higher than ever as General Howe aimed to capture Albany, New York. Washington, aware of the strategic importance of this campaign, dispatched his most trusted general, Benedict Arnold, to thwart British advances. The pivotal moment came on October 17, 1777, at the Battle of Saratoga. American forces, bolstered by Arnold's tenacity and leadership, delivered a crushing blow to the British. The victory at Saratoga is often regarded as the turning point of the Revolutionary War. The American triumph not only boosted morale, but also secured vital French support. The French government, witnessing the resolve and success of the American cause, formally allied with the colonies, providing military assistance and resources crucial to the war effort. In the years that followed, the war would continue with brutal battles and significant losses on both sides. Yet, the victories at Trenton and Saratoga marked a crucial turning point, solidifying the resolve of the American forces and drawing international attention to their struggle. As the conflict wore on, Washington would face the harsh realities of leadership, the challenges of an under-resourced army, the complexities of alliances, and the relentless pressure of a formidable adversary. Amid these trials, the ideals espoused in the Declaration of Independence became a rallying cry for the soldiers who fought in the trenches, many of whom faced dire conditions on a daily basis. Their sacrifices, driven by the promise of liberty and self-determination, were etched into the fabric of the nation they sought to create. Through every skirmish and setback, the vision of a free and independent America endured. As 1781 approached, the culmination of years of struggle loomed on the horizon. The individual paths of Washington, Jefferson, and their contemporaries had intertwined with the very fate of the nation. Each man stood at a precipice, shaped by the battles fought and the dreams of a new world forged in the crucible of war. The impact of their actions would echo through time, defining the legacy of a nation born from revolution. In quiet moments, the words of the Declaration lingered, a testament to the courage and determination that propelled a fledgling nation toward its destiny. In the wake of the Battle of Bunker Hill on June 17, 1775, the immediate aftermath was marked by both profound loss and an indomitable spirit of resistance. The battlefield, once a site of fierce confrontation, lay strewn with the remnants of conflict. Abandoned weapons, torn uniforms, and the stark reminders of humanity's fragility. The British forces had claimed victory, but at a steep price. The British Army suffered 1,054 casualties, including over 200 dead, a shocking toll that stunned even the most hardened soldiers. Among the fallen was the young Dr. Joseph Warren, a key figure in the revolutionary movement, whose death resonated deeply across the colonies. He had been a voice for liberty, famously declaring, "I would rather die than be a slave." The colonial forces, numbering around 1,500, faced significant losses as well, with approximately 450 men killed or wounded. The struggle had been fierce. Colonel William Prescott's command to hold their ground had infused his troops with courage amid the chaos. Though they had retreated, the valor displayed by the American militia galvanized support for the revolutionary cause. In the weeks following the battle, this spirit of determination began to ripple through the colonies, igniting a fervor that would prove pivotal in the months to come. As news of the battle spread, the impact was immediate and profound. In Philadelphia, the Continental Congress convened again, spurred by the realization that the conflict would not end with mere words or petitions. John Hancock, the president of the Congress, remarked, "We must be united, we must be strong." The delegates recognized the necessity of forming a more organized military response. Each colony began to mobilize its militia, gathering supplies and arms in preparation for the battles that lay ahead. The spirit of unity was palpable. Many colonies sent aid to Boston, providing food, clothing, and even medical supplies to the wounded. In the aftermath, the city of Boston itself transformed. British General Thomas Gage tightened his grip on the city, declaring martial law, yet the presence of British soldiers only fueled resentment among the colonists. Tensions mounted as the people of Boston watched their city become a garrison. In the streets, whispers of rebellion grew louder. The Boston Gazette reported on the growing discontent, stating, "The spirit of liberty is rising. We must not rest until we are free." Meanwhile, the loss of life weighed heavily on the minds of families who had sent fathers, sons, and brothers into battle. The emotional toll was staggering. Many families mourned the dead while grappling with the uncertainty of the future. Mrs. Warren, Joseph's widow, became a symbol of resilience, publicly advocating for the cause of independence while mourning her loss. In her grief, she penned letters that conveyed both sorrow and determination, echoing the sentiments of countless others who had sacrificed dearly. As weeks turned into months, the call for unity and resistance grew stronger. The Continental Army was officially established by the Second Continental Congress in July 1775, with George Washington appointed as its commander. Washington, who had witnessed firsthand the aftermath of Bunker Hill, understood the need for discipline and structure. He wrote in a letter to Congress, "I can only say that I am ready to devote myself to the service of my country," emphasizing his commitment to the revolutionary cause. The winter of 1775 approached, stark and unforgiving. Supplies dwindled as the British blockade tightened, and the colonists faced not only the threat of military engagement, but also the harsh realities of survival. Many soldiers endured bitter cold, their uniforms inadequate against the elements. The situation prompted a surge of enlistments, as men from all walks of life answered the call to arms, driven by a desire for freedom. They came from farms, cities, and towns, united in their quest for liberty. The psychological impact of Bunker Hill also resonated across the colonies. The battle had showcased the ability of untrained militia to stand against professional soldiers. News of the confrontation inspired resistance movements in places like Virginia and North Carolina, where local militias began to form in greater numbers. The resolve to fight against oppression spread like wildfire, leading to the establishment of the Committees of Safety, which helped coordinate local efforts against British rule. In the months following the battle, the colonial propaganda machine began to take shape, with pamphlets and broadsheets circulating widely. One of the most influential was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, published in January 1776. Paine's words resonated with the populace, urging them to break free from the chains of monarchy. He wrote, "The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth." His call to action further fueled the revolutionary fervor ignited by the events at Bunker Hill. As the year unfolded, the realities of war loomed large. The British, despite their victory, were growing increasingly aware of the colonial determination. Military engagements would continue, leading to further clashes in New York and beyond. Yet the spirit of Bunker Hill lingered. It had transformed ordinary men into soldiers and ignited a movement that would forever alter the course of history. By late 1775, the colonies were irrevocably changed. The battle had not only tested their military mettle, but had also woven a new fabric of identity. The impending struggle for independence was no longer a distant possibility. It was a reality that would demand sacrifice, unity, and an unwavering resolve. In the quiet moments of reflection, the echoes of Bunker Hill remained, a testament to the courage and sacrifice that would define a nation's fight for freedom. And as winter drew near, the fires of rebellion burned brightly, fueled by the memories of those who had fallen and the hopes of those who would rise to take their place. The Battle of Bunker Hill, despite its immediate tactical outcome favoring the British, became a symbol of the burgeoning American resolve for freedom. It was not merely a clash of arms, it was a confrontation steeped in ideology, a battleground for the ideals of liberty and resistance against tyranny. The narrative of the battle evolved quickly. Initially, it was seen as a somber reminder of the cost of rebellion. The colonial forces, though outnumbered and inexperienced, had inflicted significant casualties on the British, losing approximately 450 men to the British's over 1,000. In the months that followed, the battle's legacy would be inscribed in the annals of American history, etched into the minds of a populace increasingly galvanized by the fight for independence. As the revolution unfolded, the events of June 17, 1775 were recast in the public imagination. It was recounted in pamphlets, speeches, and eventually school textbooks. Samuel Adams, a key figure in the revolutionary movement, remarked, "The battle is not to the strong alone, it is to the vigilant, the active, the brave." This sentiment captured the essence of the colonial spirit and emphasized the idea that valor stood at the core of American identity. The battle became a rallying cry, a testament to the determination of ordinary men to stand against one of the world's most formidable military powers. The mythologizing of Bunker Hill did not stop with mere valor. It expanded into a narrative of heroism and sacrifice. Figures like Joseph Warren, a physician and revolutionary leader who lost his life that day, were celebrated as martyrs for the cause. His last words, urging his fellow soldiers to stand firm, resonated through the years, reinforcing the idea of noble sacrifice for freedom. The symbolism surrounding the battle would eventually overshadow the harsh realities of combat, as the sacrifices made by all who fought became enshrined in a romanticized vision of the American Revolution. With each passing decade, the battle's legacy was molded to fit the evolving national identity. By the time of the centennial celebration in 1875, Bunker Hill had transformed into a monument of American exceptionalism. Speeches delivered at the event echoed the themes of liberty and independence. The construction of the Bunker Hill Monument, inaugurated in 1843, stood tall as a testament to the bravery displayed by the colonial militia. Yet it is crucial to remember that this memorialization was selective. It often glossed over the complexities of the conflict, the diverse motivations of those who fought, and the brutal realities of war. The impact of Bunker Hill extended beyond the battlefield. It contributed to a growing sense of American nationalism, uniting disparate colonies under the banner of a common cause. The battle catalyzed enlistments and donations to the revolutionary cause, as citizens began to view participation in the struggle for independence as an essential duty. Local militias proliferated, and the Continental Army began to take shape, bolstered by the fervor ignited by the events of that fateful day. However, the legacy of the battle also carried with it a darker shadow. As the revolution progressed, the ideals articulated by leaders like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington would often stand in stark contrast to the realities faced by enslaved individuals and marginalized groups. The Declaration of Independence proclaimed that all men are created equal, yet the fight for freedom was not equally shared. The war's aftermath saw the entrenchment of slavery and the marginalization of Native American populations as the new nation expanded westward. The struggle for liberty that began with the fight at Bunker Hill would take on many forms in the centuries that followed, often revealing uncomfortable truths about who truly benefited from the revolution. As the years turned into decades and then centuries, the battle's legacy continued to be re-examined and redefined. The narratives surrounding Bunker Hill became intertwined with the broader struggles for civil rights and social justice. The battle served as a touchstone for those advocating for equality, as they sought to challenge the foundational ideals of the nation. Figures like Frederick Douglass, who fought for the abolition of slavery, invoked the spirit of the revolution, insisting that the promise of independence must be extended to all individuals. He famously stated, "The great principles of the Declaration of Independence are that governments are instituted among men to secure their rights, that all men are created equal. This perspective highlighted the ongoing conflict between the revolutionary ideals and the social realities of the nation. In contemporary discourse, the legacy of Bunker Hill is often examined through the lens of historical memory. The battle stands as a reminder of the complexity of revolutions, where ideals can clash with reality. The retelling of the battle and its aftermath reflects broader themes of conflict, sacrifice, and the evolving understanding of liberty. As the nation grapples with its past, Bunker Hill remains a salient point of reference for discussions about equality, justice, and the true meaning of freedom. Today, visitors to the Bunker Hill Monument reflect on the sacrifices made there, not just as symbols of military valor, but as reminders of an ongoing struggle for rights that extend beyond the battlefield. The monument, with its towering obelisk, serves as a physical manifestation of the revolutionary spirit, but also calls for reflection on the complexities of that legacy. It underscores the notion that while the battle ignited a flame of independence, it also left unresolved issues that would echo through American history. As you lie back and consider the events of that day, remember the words of Colonel William Prescott, who commanded his men to hold their ground against overwhelming odds. His charge resonates through time, embodying the spirit of determination that defines the American narrative, one that continues to evolve, challenge, and inspire. The legacy of Bunker Hill is not merely a chapter in history, it is an enduring dialogue about liberty, sacrifice, and the ongoing quest for equality. The unfolding narrative of the American Revolution reveals profound truths about human nature. It is a tale interwoven with threads of ambition, love for one's homeland, the relentless pursuit of power, and the heart-wrenching specter of failure. Each figure in this story, from the resolute Colonel William Prescott to the impassioned Samuel Adams, embodies the struggle between individual desires and collective destiny. Their ambitions were not solely for personal gain, rather they sought to carve a path toward freedom and self-determination for their fellow colonists. As the battles intensified, so too did the bonds of camaraderie among the soldiers. Love for their families, their communities, and their shared ideals fueled their courage. In the face of overwhelming odds, such as at Bunker Hill, the colonial forces stood resolute, driven by a commitment to a cause greater than themselves. The sacrifice of figures like Joseph Warren, who fell amid the chaos, reminds us that love often demands the highest price, and that true valor is often born in the crucible of despair. Yet the ambition for independence also brought with it the harsh realities of conflict. The Revolutionary War was not merely a struggle against British oppression, but a complex dance of power, where alliances shifted and loyalties were tested. The narrative of this revolution teaches us that the quest for power can lead to both extraordinary feats and devastating failures. As leaders emerged, their decisions had far-reaching consequences, echoing through the lives of countless individuals caught in the tide of history. The battlefields may have been rife with chaos and destruction, but they also served as a crucible for survival. Amidst the clashing of swords and the cries of anguish, resilience emerged as a defining trait of the American spirit. The resolve to stand against tyranny, despite the specter of death, illustrates a fundamental aspect of human nature. The instinct to fight for survival and justice, even when the outcome is uncertain. As we reflect on these events, we realize that they resonate deeply with the human experience. The stories of ambition, love, power, and survival remind us that our struggles, though they may differ in context and scale, are part of a larger tapestry of existence. Each battle fought during this tumultuous time serves as a testament to the enduring spirit of those who dared to dream of a better future. In the quiet of night, as the echoes of the past linger, let us carry the lessons of these brave souls into our dreams, reminding ourselves that within the heart of humanity lies an unyielding desire for freedom, love, and connection. Thank you for spending this time with us. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the past, consider subscribing to Sleeping History Dreams for more long-form historical storytelling each week. Good night, and we'll see you in the next one.